My name is Clara, and I'm 26 years old. I'm standing here today in the quiet hallway of the house I grew up in, the house my mother loved more than anything. But just 1 week ago, in this very spot, my stepfather, Mark, looked me dead in the eye, his face a mask of cold entitlement, and gave me an ultimatum that shattered the last remnants of my grief-stricken world. He said, "Your mother left you everything. So you're going to give me $200,000 of your inheritance, or you're going to pack your bags and get out." He thought he was kicking me out of my future. He had no idea that he was just a long-term guest in a house that was already, and always had been, in my name. The air was still thick with the scent of funeral lilies. It had only been a month since we buried my mom, a month of walking through these rooms like a ghost, expecting to see her walk around the corner with a cup of tea and a warm smile. Mark had been distant. I thought it was his way of grieving. I realize now it was his way of calculating. He sat me down at the large oak dining table, the one my mother had painstakingly restored by hand. He didn't offer condolences. He didn't ask how I was coping. He slid a piece of paper across the polished wood, a crudely written demand for a wire transfer. When I stared at it, speechless, he began his speech. He talked about all the years he'd put up with my mother's illness. He talked about the renovations he'd overseen, conveniently forgetting that my mother paid for every single nail and can of paint. He spoke of his own future, his plans, his needs. My mother, his wife of 10 years, was reduced to a financial transaction he had endured. My grief was an inconvenience to his payday. He said I was young, that I didn't need that much money, that it was only fair he get a severance package for his time as a husband. The shock was like a physical blow, knocking the air from my lungs. This man, who my mother had loved, who I had tried so hard to build a relationship with, was trying to extort me while her memory was still fresh in every corner of the house. I told him no. I told him it was my mother's legacy, meant to secure my future, the one she worried about so much. His face hardened. The fake sympathy he'd been wearing for weeks melted away to reveal the greedy, cruel man underneath. "Fine," he sneered, standing up so fast his chair scraped violently against the floor. "This is my house now. I was her husband. You have 1 week to get your things and get out. Don't make me call the sheriff to escort you." He pointed a trembling, angry finger toward the front door, the very door my father had carried me through as a baby. He saw me as a child to be dismissed, a problem to be removed. What he failed to understand was that my mother was not just loving, she was brilliant. And she had seen this coming all along. Have you ever had your entire world turned upside down by the greed of someone who was supposed to be family? Share your experience in the comments. Your story might be the one that gives someone else the strength to fight back. And please, make sure you're subscribed, because you're going to want to see what happened when his 1-week deadline was up. To understand the audacity of his demand, you have to understand the decade that preceded it. That confrontation at the dining table wasn't a sudden storm. It was the hurricane that had been building offshore for 10 years, and I had been too busy trying to patch the leaks in our little family boat to see it coming. Mark came into our lives when I was 16. My father had passed away years before, and my mom was lonely. Mark was charming, a contractor with a confident smile and a story for every occasion. He made my mother laugh, and for that, I was willing to overlook almost anything. At first, the injustices were small, like paper cuts. He'd borrow my mom's car and bring it back with the gas tank on empty. He'd make jokes about my academic interests, calling my love for history useless, always steering the conversation back to something practical, something he understood, like carpentry or sports. He was slowly, subtly, positioning himself as the man of the house, the voice of reason against the supposed frivolities of my mother and me. My mom, bless her heart, saw him as a project, a good man with a rough exterior. She paid off his lingering credit card debts, calling it an investment in our future. She co-signed a loan for a new work truck for him after his old one unexpectedly died, something I now suspect was a lie. He never contributed a dime to the household bills. His income, he claimed, was all tied up in his business, a business that never seemed to show any actual profit, but always required more and more of my mother's money for materials or equipment. I tried to bring it up with her once, gently. I asked if she'd seen any receipts for the thousands of dollars of lumber he'd supposedly bought for a deck renovation. She got defensive, asking me why I couldn't just be happy for her. Mark had overheard, and for a week he treated me with a chilling silence, punishing me for questioning him. It was then I learned that keeping the peace meant keeping my mouth shut. The real shift happened when my mom got sick. Her diagnosis was a slow, creeping illness that would eventually take her strength, but in the beginning, it just made her tired. Mark saw his opportunity. He stepped up, transforming into the doting husband in a way that fooled everyone. He became the gatekeeper. "Your mother needs her rest," he'd tell me when I came home from my part-time job, wanting to sit with her. He'd answer her phone, telling her friends she was sleeping. He was isolating her, wrapping himself around her like a boa constrictor, squeezing tighter and tighter until he was all she had. He convinced her to give him power of attorney over her finances, "Just to make things easier, honey, so you don't have to worry about paying bills." She was so tired, so scared, that she agreed. He used that power to bleed her dry, all under the guise of care. He insisted on hiring private nurses, friends of his, who charged exorbitant rates for what I later discovered was substandard care. When I offered to quit my job and be her full-time caregiver, he scoffed. "You don't know what you're doing, Clara. You'll just make things worse. This is a job for professionals." He made me feel small, incompetent, like my love for my mother was less valuable than his ability to write a check from her account. The renovations he mentioned in his demand? That was the worst part. For 2 years, our house was a construction zone. He claimed he was making it more accessible for her. He ripped out perfectly good bathrooms, tore down walls, all while she was confined to her bedroom. He'd fill the house with dust and noise, then complain to her about how hard he was working, how much it was all costing. He was a martyr in a play of his own creation, and my mom was his captive audience. He was racking up a debt against her, in his own mind, a debt he fully intended to collect from her estate. Every nail he hammered was an IOU. Every dollar of her money he spent was, in his twisted logic, an investment he was making, for which he deserved a massive return. He wasn't caring for a dying woman, he was stripping an asset before the final liquidation. After his threat, I didn't argue. I didn't scream. I just turned and walked up the stairs to my childhood bedroom, closing the door behind me with a soft click. The sound echoed the closing of a chapter, the end of my life in this house. For the first 2 days of his 1-week deadline, I was paralyzed by a grief so profound it felt like a physical weight on my chest. I sat on my bed, staring at the walls, at the fading posters from my teenage years, and I cried. I cried for my mother. I cried for the happy memories that now felt tainted. And I cried for myself, for the future that had just been stolen from me. I felt utterly and completely alone, a 26-year-old orphan about to be made homeless by the man who was supposed to be my family. On the 3rd day, the despair gave way to a dull, aching resignation. I knew I couldn't stay there. I started to pack, mechanically pulling old clothes out of my closet, sorting through books and trinkets. At the back of my mother's wardrobe, tucked away behind a stack of old photo albums, was a small, ornate wooden box. It was her memory box, where she kept things that were precious to her. My first lost tooth, a lock of my hair, a dried corsage from her first date with my father. My hands trembled as I opened it. On top of everything was a thick, cream-colored envelope. In my mother's elegant handwriting, it simply said, "For my Clara, open this when you need me most." My breath hitched. It was a letter from the past, a voice from beyond the grave. I sat on the floor, my back against the wardrobe, and I read it. The letter began with how much she loved me, how I was her greatest achievement. Then her tone shifted. She wrote about Mark. She wrote about her loneliness after my father died and how Mark's charm had been a balm at first. But she also wrote about her creeping unease. She saw the way he looked at her possessions, the way his eyes would glaze over when she spoke of the value of an antique or a piece of jewelry. She wrote, "I hope I am wrong about him, my love. I hope he loves me for me. But a mother's instinct is a powerful thing, and mine is telling me to protect you, just in case. I was a fool for love, but I was never a fool about my legacy for you." The last paragraph was my salvation. "I have made arrangements," she wrote. "Our family lawyer, Mr. Henderson, has all the necessary documents. His number is in my old address book. Do not tell Mark. Do not show him this letter. Just go and see Mr. Henderson. He will know what to do. Remember, my darling girl, you are stronger than you think. This house is your foundation. Never let anyone take it from you." The tears stopped. A strange, cold clarity washed over me. The grief was still there, a hot coal in my chest, but it was now surrounded by something else: purpose. The next morning, I told Mark I was going to see friends to arrange a place to stay. He smirked, pleased with his victory. Instead, I drove straight to Mr. Henderson's office downtown. He was an old, kind man with gentle eyes who had handled my family's affairs for 30 years. He ushered me into his office, and before I could even finish explaining, he held up a hand. "I've been waiting for your call, Clara," he said softly. "Your mother was a very wise woman. She foresaw this possibility years ago." He then slid a thick portfolio across his desk. He explained that 10 years ago, right before she married Mark, my mother had come to see him. On his advice, she had performed a legal maneuver. She had transferred the ownership of the house, the physical property, and the land it stood on entirely and irrevocably into my name. It was done when I turned 18, a quiet transaction that required only my signature on a document she'd told me was for college financial aid. Because I was a legal adult, Mark had no claim. He was not on the deed. He was not in the trust. He had no spousal rights to the property itself because she didn't own it when she married him. He was, in the eyes of the law, a tenant, a long-term, non-paying resident in a house owned by me. Mr. Henderson then turned the portfolio around. On the top was a freshly printed copy of the property deed, and there, in clear, undeniable black ink, was my name listed as the sole owner, Clara Ann Peterson. The fight went out of my body, replaced by a steel rod of resolve. I wasn't a girl being kicked out. I was a landlord, and my tenant's lease was about to expire. I walked out of Mr. Henderson's office a different person. The grief-stricken lost girl who had walked in was gone. In her place was a woman with a plan, armed with the truth and my mother's foresight. I spent the rest of his 1-week deadline not packing my bags, but gathering my ammunition. My first move was to play the part he expected of me. When I got home that afternoon, I looked defeated. I told him I was having trouble finding a place, but that I was working on it. I let my shoulders slump. I avoided his eyes. He loved it. He practically gloated, offering insincere platitudes like, "Don't worry, you'll land on your feet. A tough lesson is a good lesson." He felt powerful, in control, completely oblivious to the storm gathering right under his roof. While he was out during the day, supposedly working but probably spending what was left of my mother's cash accounts, I was a whirlwind of quiet activity. With Mr. Henderson guiding me every step of the way via phone calls, I began the official eviction process. It was surprisingly straightforward. Since there was no lease, Mark was classified as a tenant at will. All I needed to do was provide him with a formal, written notice to vacate the premises within 30 days, as required by state law. Mr. Henderson drafted the notice, a cold, legally precise document that was the complete opposite of Mark's handwritten demand. He sent it to me via a secure email portal. I printed it out on high-quality paper, the same kind my mom used for important letters. It felt fitting. But I knew a simple eviction notice wasn't enough. I needed to understand the full scope of his deception. Armed with the power of attorney over my mother's estate, which now fell to me as the executor of her will, I requested the last 5 years of her bank and credit card statements. Mr. Henderson helped expedite the process. When the digital files arrived, I spent 2 entire nights in my room, a lamp casting a small circle of light on the dining table, poring over line after line of transactions. It was worse than I could have ever imagined. The professional nurses were paid double the standard rate, with large recurring bonus payments. The material costs for his renovations were wildly inflated. There were thousands of dollars spent at high-end electronics stores, golf courses, and even a down payment on a boat, all disguised under his contracting business name. He hadn't just been living off her. He had been systematically liquidating her assets for his own pleasure, all while she was dying, just 1 room away. I meticulously highlighted every suspicious charge, creating a separate spreadsheet, cross-referencing dates with his supposed work on the house. The numbers painted a portrait of a con artist, a parasite who had latched onto my mother's kindness and drained her. This evidence wasn't just for my own validation. It was my shield. If he tried to fight the eviction, if he tried to take me to court claiming he was owed something for his years of care, I would be ready. I would show the world and any judge exactly what his care had looked like. I also took photos of the house, photos of the half-finished projects, the shoddy workmanship I could now see with clear eyes, the expensive tools still in their boxes that he'd bought with her money. On the 6th day, the day before his deadline for me was up, I did one last thing. I went to the local hardware store and bought a new set of high-security locks for every exterior door. I kept them in a bag in my car. I was no longer just reacting to his threat. I was preparing for my future, a future in my house, a future he had no part in. Every document I printed, every number I highlighted, every photo I took felt like a small act of justice for my mom. I was taking back control, not with shouting or tears, but with cold, hard facts. He thought he was watching a scared little girl pack her bags. He had no idea he was watching a fortress being built around him, brick by silent brick. The 7th day arrived. The air in the house was thick with his smug anticipation. He came downstairs late, around 10 a.m., dressed in his golf shirt, clearly expecting to find me gone or in the final stages of a tearful departure. Instead, he found me sitting at the head of the oak dining table, his usual spot. In front of me was a neat stack of papers. I was wearing a black blazer, a silent armor I had chosen for the occasion. The look of confusion on his face was the first crack in his facade. "Clara, what are you still doing here? I thought we agreed. Your time is up," he said, his voice laced with annoyance, not yet alarm. I didn't get up. I simply looked at him, my gaze steady and cold. "We didn't agree on anything, Mark. You gave me an ultimatum. Now I have a response." I gestured to the chair opposite me. "Please, sit down. There are a few things we need to discuss." He hesitated, then reluctantly sat, a sneer playing on his lips. "There's nothing to discuss. Either the money is in my account, or you are leaving. It's that simple." "It is simple," I agreed, my voice calm, "just not in the way you think." I slid the top document from my stack across the polished table. It was the official copy of the house deed. His eyes scanned it, and I watched the moment his brain processed the information. He saw the date of the transfer, 10 years ago. He saw the grantor, my mother, and he saw the grantee, Clara Ann Peterson. The sneer on his face vanished, replaced by a slack-jawed disbelief. His face went pale. "What is this? This is some kind of forgery. It's fake," he stammered, pushing the paper away as if it were hot. "It's a certified copy from the county recorder's office," I said flatly. "Mom transferred the house to me when I turned 18, right before you two got married. She was a lot of things, Mark, but a fool wasn't one of them. This house, the one you're so graciously trying to kick me out of, has been legally mine for the last 8 years. You haven't been a homeowner, you've been a guest." His face cycled through a series of emotions: shock, confusion, and then a deep, boiling rage. Your mother, she tricked me," he roared, slamming his fist on the table, making the papers jump. "For 10 years. I lived here, I took care of her, I improved this place." "Improved it?" I let out a short, bitter laugh. I slid the next set of documents across the table. The bank statements. "Let's talk about your improvements." I tapped the first highlighted line item. $2,000 for a professional consultation on the bathroom remodel. Funny, that company went out of business 3 years before you supposedly hired them. Or how about these payments to Lakeside Marine? Did you pay for your boat with the money meant for my mother's pain medication, Mark? I continued, my voice gaining strength with every word, every piece of evidence I laid out. I showed him the inflated invoices from his nurse friends. I showed him the credit card statements filled with charges from steakhouses and resorts during the weeks my mother was at her worst. "You didn't care for her," I said, my voice dropping to a near whisper, but carrying more weight than his shouting. "You saw a dying woman, and you saw a piggy bank you could smash open. You isolated her, you spent her money, and you stood by while she faded away, all while planning how you'd steal the rest from her daughter. He was speechless, cornered. The self-righteous anger drained out of him, leaving behind a pathetic, sputtering man. He tried to argue, to say they were misunderstandings, that he deserved compensation, but his words were hollow. "You deserve nothing," I said, my voice like ice. I stood up, taking the final document from the bottom of my stack. I unfolded it and laid it on the table in front of him. It was the formal 30-day notice to vacate. "This is not a negotiation. This is an eviction notice. You have 30 days to remove yourself and your personal belongings from my property." I paused, letting the words sink in. "If you are not gone by then, I will have the sheriff escort you out, the same sheriff you threatened me with." He stared at the paper, then up at me. The man who had held all the power just minutes before now looked small and utterly defeated. The hunter had become the prey. I walked to the front door and opened it. "Your 1-week deadline for me is over, Mark, but your 30-day deadline starts now. I suggest you start packing. If seeing a bully finally get what they deserve gives you a sense of justice, hit that like button. It helps our channel reach more people who need to hear that it's possible to turn the tables." The 30 days that followed were a strange, tense ballet. Mark didn't leave immediately. For the first week, he sulked around the house like a caged animal, alternating between bouts of furious silence and pathetic attempts to appeal to my sense of pity. He'd talk about the good times he and my mom had, conveniently forgetting that he had reduced her to a balance sheet just weeks before. He'd tell me I was being cruel, that I was throwing a grieving widower out on the street. I held firm. I had a calendar in my room, and I crossed off each day with a thick red marker. My grief for my mother was real, but my pity for him had evaporated completely. He tried to get a lawyer. I know because Mr. Henderson got a call from a rather flustered attorney who, after being presented with a copy of the deed and a summary of the financial evidence I had compiled, promptly informed Mark he had no case and dropped him as a client. The threat of me countersuing for financial exploitation and fraud was a powerful deterrent. After that, the fight seemed to go out of him. He started packing, but with the petulance of a child. He was deliberately slow, leaving messes in his wake, trying to make the process as miserable for me as possible. On the 30th day, at 9 a.m. sharp, a moving truck, one that I had arranged and prepaid for with a portion of my inheritance, pulled into the driveway. I wanted him gone, and I was willing to pay to expedite the process. I stood on the porch, arms crossed, as 2 movers efficiently loaded his boxes and furniture. He tried one last time, standing in the doorway, his face haggard. "What am I supposed to do, Clara? Where am I supposed to go?" he asked, his voice cracking. "That's no longer my concern, Mark," I said, my voice devoid of emotion. "You had 10 years to build a life. You chose to try and steal one instead." I stepped aside, and he walked out of the house for the last time. As the moving truck pulled away, a profound silence settled over the house. It wasn't the heavy, grief-stricken silence of the past month. It was a clean, peaceful quiet. The air felt lighter. It was the sound of freedom. The moment the truck was out of sight, I closed the front door and walked through every room. I opened all the windows, letting fresh air chase out the stale energy of his presence. Then, I retrieved the bag from my car, and with a screwdriver and a sense of fierce satisfaction, I began to change the locks on every single door. Each click of a new tumbler settling into place was a declaration of ownership, a reclamation of my space, my home, my life. I wasn't just locking him out, I was locking my future in. The financial fallout for him was swift. Without my mother's money to prop him up, his house of cards collapsed. The boat was repossessed. I heard through the grapevine that he was being investigated for contract fraud by some of his other clients, people who had likely been overcharged and underserved just as my mother had been. He had to sell his precious truck to cover legal fees and ended up moving into a small, run-down apartment across town. He had gambled everything on my inheritance and lost spectacularly. For me, victory wasn't loud or explosive. It was quiet and deep. It was sitting on the living room floor, surrounded by my mother's things, and finally being able to grieve her without the shadow of his greed looming over me. It was taking the spreadsheet of his fraudulent spending and handing it over to the estate's forensic accountant, with instructions to recover every single penny he stole. It was the freedom to begin healing, not just from the loss of my mother, but from a decade of being made to feel small and powerless. The house was no longer just a building. It was a sanctuary my mother had built for me, and I had successfully defended it. It's been 6 months since I changed the locks. The silence in this house is different now. It's not empty. It's peaceful. It breathes with my mother's memory, not his. I've started the slow process of undoing his renovations, hiring a real contractor to fix his shoddy work and restore the rooms to the way my mom loved them. Every repaired wall, every correctly installed fixture feels like I'm erasing a scar from the heart of my home. I often find myself talking to her, thanking her, not just for the house, but for the final, most important lesson she ever taught me, that true protection isn't about shielding someone from the world, but about giving them the tools to face it. Her foresight was her final act of love, a weapon she left behind for me to find when I needed it most. This journey was never about the $200,000 he demanded. It wasn't even entirely about the house. It was about reclaiming my value. Mark tried to put a price tag on my mother's love and my future. He saw me as a tearful, weak girl he could easily intimidate and discard. He taught me that some people only understand the language of power and money, but the most valuable things, dignity, integrity, and self-worth, are the things they can never truly take unless you let them. The timid girl who would stay silent to avoid Mark's disapproval is gone. In her place is a woman who learned that her voice, backed by truth, is the most powerful weapon she has. I discovered a strength I never knew I possessed, a resilience forged in grief and fire. My story is a testament to the fact that you can be cornered, you can be grieving, and you can still find the strength to fight back and win. It's for anyone out there who has ever been underestimated, manipulated, or made to feel small by someone who should have protected them. Trust your instincts, gather your facts, and never ever let anyone else define your worth or what you are entitled to. Thank you for listening to my story and for being a part of this journey with me. If you believe in the power of truth and resilience, please subscribe to our channel and become part of a community that celebrates strength and justice. Your support means the world.